central core of what goes on around the Bay. We try to bring those Bay users together to work in the best long-term interests of Galveston Bay. And I think if you look around this room today, you will notice representation from all those different user groups. So thank you again for continuing to be supporters of the Galveston Bay Foundation. Our mission is to preserve, protect, and enhance the natural resources of Galveston Bay for present users and for posterity. What I like to say is for us, our kids, our grandkids, and their grandkids, to make sure that we have such a special place today and in the future. And we definitely wouldn't be here without the support of you, our community. I want to thank all of our many sponsors and auction donors whose names you will see displayed on the screens you'll see during lunchtime. I want to particularly thank our Guardian sponsors, Kirby Corporation and Catherine McGovern and the McGovern Foundation for their generous support of this year's lunch. We also want to recognize the Protector sponsors, Accenture, NRG Energy, Sandra and Fred Pounds, who are also our co-chairs for Luncheon, Satterfield and Ponticus, Cynthia and Don Stevenson, and the Madeline Stevenson Foundation. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to thank Shell Oil for their title sponsorship of Bike Around the Bay and also for being here today. We're grateful for all of our continuous support, all of our new support. I want you to have a chance to watch the slides that are going to be playing during lunch. And I think you'll see that we've got a lot of exciting stuff going on. We just have so many good things going on these days. One thing in particular, we're really proud to announce that just last month, we closed on a piece of property in Trinity Bay. It's going to be our new Trinity Bay Education Center. And it's on 17 acres of property. It has a gully going through it. It's called Cedar Gully. And it's just another example of us kind of working to expand our mission and our efforts, particularly our education work. But we're also working on somewhere which will serve as our full permanent headquarters location. And we are really excited we think we're going to close on something this fall, and you're going to hear a lot more about that. So again, thank you for your support. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on, and I just really appreciate you being here again. I also want to make a specific thank you. I want to call our luncheon chairs up to join me, Sandra and Fred Pounds. And so I'd like to have everybody recognize Sandra and Fred for doing such an awesome job bringing us together.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's a real honor to be asked to chair this event. Sandra and I are very, very pleased to have done that, and I want to thank all our family and friends and all the others here today for the wonderful support you've shown the foundation. Our foundation is very dynamic and worthy, and both Sandra and I are very committed, and we look forward to helping in other ways in the future. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
All right, just to say, everyone enjoy your lunch. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Very nice. For our award presentation, we have Bob Stokes, President of the Office of the Foundation, and our Board of Directors Chairman, Timothy Love. On the way. As you saw, Accenture is committed to sustainable growth throughout their entire operation. Locally, Accenture's partnership with the Galveston Bay Foundation provides their employees with multiple volunteer opportunities that have a positive impact on our environment. In addition, Accenture has recently adopted the Earth Share of Texas Workplace Giving Program, which provides their employees with an easy way to support conservation groups throughout Texas and beyond. We applaud Accenture for this effort. Please welcome to the stage Guardian of the Bay honoree for business, Accenture, represented here today by Accenture's Managing Director in charge of corporate sustainability efforts, Mr. Jeff Myers. Notice maybe these bottles of water in a minute. As you saw, the city of Nassau Bay has worked diligently to protect their natural environment through a variety of efforts, including the Galveston Bay Foundation's Rain Barrel program, the Cease the Grease campaign, and multiple GBF Marshmania planting events, which have significantly reduced erosion and improved water quality in the Nassau Bay area. We are proud to honor the city of Nassau Bay for their continued efforts to preserve and protect the natural resources of Galveston Bay. Please welcome to the stage our Guardian of the Bay Award honoree for government, the city of Nassau Bay, represented by Mayor Mark Denman. Rick Stewart is a great example of how one individual can make a difference. With the support of the Galveston Bay Foundation, local yacht clubs, the Texas Mariners Cruising Association, the cities of Nassau Bay, Seabrook, and Keynote, Rick approached the Texas General Land Office about the removal of multiple abandoned and dangerous oil and gas platforms throughout Galveston Bay. And as you saw, they said, go get them. The Bay is a safer place for everyone now, thanks to Rick. Now, please welcome to the stage our Guardian of the Bay Award honoree for the community, Rick Stewart. And now Bob will have a few words to say about today's keynote speaker.
All right, thank you, Frank. So it truly is my sincere pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker today. Carter Smith is the Executive Director of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and has served in that role since January of 2008. I can tell you with all sincerity that yes, Texans are lucky to have him in that role. He is doing great work in the state of Texas. He's a hunter and an angler and a 7th-generation Texas landowner. He has degrees from Texas Tech and what I would personally argue is the top Ivy League school in the nation, Yale University. Early in his career, he worked locally as the first executive director of the Katy Prairie Conservancy here in the Houston area. But the Nature Conservancy snapped him up quickly, and he soon became their Texas State Director. In his time at Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, he has provided terrific leadership and guided Texas Parks and Wildlife through some very difficult budgetary times. Fundamentally, Carter gets conservation and he gets people. And that is what really allows him to be successful. I am truly honored to call him a friend and thankful that he was joining us here today. Please help me welcome Mr. Carter Smith.
Thank you, Bob, for that very kind and generous introduction. Bob, I'm going to have to confess I will do what I can to live up to that. I should also confess that I'm a little bedraggled, perhaps more than usual. I was telling Bob and Macy over lunch that we have this little 11-and-a-half-month boy roaming around our house now. And the biologist in me, I certainly find him a fascinating little creature. But to put it in perhaps Texas Parks and Wildlife parlance, it's a little bit like having your own feral hog roaming around the house. And last night I flew in from St. Louis and got in pretty late. He had long since gone to sleep, and I woke up about 2:30 with just a series of loud crashes, which is never good. So I go into Ryland's room, and that little bushwhacker, he was nowhere to be found. And so my wife is calling from the bedroom, where is he, where is he? Well, not quite realizing the power and implications of my words, I said, he's gone. She flying out of her room like a rifle shot, as you might imagine. We didn't have to go far to find Ryland, and apparently he had maneuvered something to allow him to climb over the cliff. fallen out on a beanbag, thank God, or else I'd be giving this speech from Skype from the emergency room. And there he was, just happy as a clam. He had pulled off 2 shelves of books. I don't know if he thought he was going to read War and Peace or what his little strategy was, but he's playing tug of war with our border collie in the living room with one of my wife's boots. So I will tell you, it was something of a restive night, and life is certainly a whole lot more interesting with Riley in it than it was without him. Let me say this as a point of departure, and it's something probably that you don't hear enough from all of us at your Texas Parks and Wildlife. Thank you. We can't do our work without you. Not only do we appreciate the support that you give us, but we depend on it. If I look across this room, there is no doubt in my mind that every single person in this room at some point in the last couple of years has either bought a hunting license, bought a fishing license, or visited a state park. And we're proud to work for you. Let me tell you what you support. You help support 95 state parks and historic sites. These are the places that literally and figuratively help tell the life and history and heritage of our great state. You support the 532 Texas game wardens who are our law off the pavement, oftentimes the only law really on the water and in rural communities around the state. They're the officers that help protect our fish and game, our lands and waters, our property, our environment, and oftentimes our lives. Through the purchase of your hunting and fishing licenses, you also help support your fisheries and wildlife biologists. Those are the men and women that proudly join organizations like Galveston Bay Foundation to help take care of our home ground and to leave it in a place better than we found it. It's also the group outreach professionals that are helping to grow the next generation of guardians at Galveston Bay. And so we're very proud of that, and I hope you are too. And it's fitting that we're here today to celebrate the work of this extraordinary organization, these extraordinary companies and individuals and agencies that just have made such a difference for our home ground. Our roots go deep in Galveston and Galveston Bay. In fact, really, we had our origins there. Back in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, there were not a preponderance of what I would call guardians of the bay. Oyster beds were getting hammered awfully hard. The millinery trade was alive and well, and so commercial hunters were harvesting any heron or eagle or ibis they could get a hold of to sell the plumage for women's hats. Fish were being seined out of existence. It was hard to find any more game in that area. So in 1862, the legislature took unprecedented action, and they instituted the very first fish and game law in the state, and they promptly closed quail season for 2 years. Now, that, I have no idea if that helped the quail. What I can tell you is that that precipitated half the counties in the state to run to the legislature and get themselves exempted from any fish and game law. That lasted for about 100 years as hunters and anglers tried to wrestle back control of that. The other thing that the legislature did was essentially create the origins of our agency. And so they established this very august sounding agency, the Office of the Fish Commissioner. Now, the Office of the Fish Commissioner, mind you, who was charged with looking over Galveston Bay, point south, lived in Austin. He was a surveyor, had very little to do with fish as far as I can tell. But here's also the deal, and as you most assuredly know, in Texas, we like our limited government. Apparently, they really like their limited government. The Office of the Fish Commissioner had no office. He had no staff. He had no salary, and he had no authority. And so that experiment in fisheries conservation didn't last long. And in 1895, the legislature came back and established your Fish and Oyster Commission, and the first 6 state game wardens were hired. And what were they hired to do? To protect oysters in Galveston Bay. And to this day, they still do that each and every day. Now, the Galveston Bay also played a prominent role in the formation of what is now known as the contemporary Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And some of you know that last year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the merger of the Game and Fish Commission and the State Parks Board. The Galveston Bay was a prominent part of that. as in all things in parks and wildlife, there are lots of hills for people to die on, and lots of political battles. And a little bit preceding that time, the Game and Fish Commission had locked horns with Brown and Root over oyster dredging in Galveston Bay. And Brown and Root went to their favorite political leader, Lyndon Johnson, for an incident that I will now share with you 60 years after the fact, so what the hell, what can you say, was quite sympathetic about it. So we had a game warden that worked the Pedernales River country west of Austin. His name was Grover Simpson. And Grover was a little cantankerous, and he was not terribly politic in terms of what he said or who he said it to. And Grover was out checking bird hunters one day. It was dove season, and he heard these shots after sunset, which, as all of the sportsmen know in this room, that's the time when you take the shells out of your shotgun. So Grover comes to the gate, and he sees 3 men standing around the truck. And he drives up, and where once there were 3, there are now 2. And he starts to talk to them, one of whom is the Blanco County judge. And Grover remembers that he had seen 3, and he looks over in the truck, and there is a gentleman hunched down with his hands over his face. Now, Grover, as I told you before, is a little impolitic, and I am going to utter a phrase here that is colorful. Probably has not been the only time it has been uttered in the River Oaks Country Club, but I promise you it will be the only time I utter it. But I am going to do Grover justice. Grover took one look at the gentleman hiding his head in his hands in the car and said, "Who's that long-eared son of a bitch in the car?" Well, that long-eared was Lyndon Baines Johnson. And Mr. Johnson took umbrage over that, as you might imagine, so he went after Grover's job. The gentleman holding my position at the time, H.K. Dodson, refused to fire him. The chair of the Game and Fish Commission, Ben Vaughn, refused to fire him. And so Mr. Johnson saw an opportunity with Governor Connally, who was instituting this government efficiency program, and was already having an axe to grind because of the oyster dredging issue with Brown and Root. So Governor Connally wanted to look at how we modernize government. And so they cooked up a plan in which they took the, at that time, cash-strapped State Parks Board, merged it with the politically encumbered Game and Fish Commission. They promptly thanked H.K. Dodson for his service. He retired to his farm in Bell County. The chairman of the Game and Fish Commission, Ben Vaughn, was removed from the commission. The Blanco County judge, who had been there for the after-hours dove shoot, was put on the new Parks and Wildlife Board. And Grover Simpson, typical game warden, finished out his career and outlived the bastards. True story. That's the history of your Texas Parks and Wildlife in 5 minutes. We're here today to reflect on the extraordinary good deeds and work of the Galveston Bay Foundation. And I think it's important that as we reflect on every marsh that they have restored, every wetland that they have helped conserve or protect, every community that they have helped engage, in every single child that they have introduced into the outdoors, we are reminded that the nature of their business is nature. And we are also reminded about the importance of what they do to help inculcate a strong sense of place and a pride of place. It's that wonderful sentiment that I think was expressed none better by Yeats in his writing in The Trembling of the Veil, in which he wrote, "Have not all people had their first unity from a mythology that marries them to rock and hill? And as Texans, we're awfully proud of our rocks and hills." And when it comes to Galveston Bay and the metaphorical rocks and hills that are found there, we're awfully proud of East Bay and West Bay. We're proud of Christmas Bay and Chocolate Bayou. We're proud of Dickinson Bayou and Bolivar Peninsula. We're proud of San Luis Pass, Smith Point. And as Bob would undoubtedly tell you, these are the places that Galveston Bay that are undoubtedly worth stewarding, they're undoubtedly worth saving, and they are undoubtedly worth sharing. They also roll up into something that is much, much larger. We're blessed to live in an extraordinary state that is one of the most biologically diverse places in all of the Western Hemisphere. More birds, more butterflies, more reptiles than any other state. Second most plants, second most mammals, third highest rate of species that are only found here. When it comes to total number of species, we are second only to California. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We're a big state. Some of that is no doubt an artifact of scale. We've got 150 million acres, 200,000 miles of rivers and creeks and streams, 4 million acres of bays and estuarine habitat. To some extent, it's an artifact of an accident of geography. We sit in a pretty interesting part of the globe if you look at our state. Southern extension of the Great Plains that come down into the Panhandle. You go out west to the Chihuahuan Desert, you see these towering sky islands that come cascading out of the desert floor. You have the northern limits of the subtropics that you find down in the Rio Grande Valley. And of course, right here, what we have is our Gulf Coast and the coastal plains. And our part of that coast, the Texas part, is a 367-mile swath of sand and sea, and mud, and marsh, and beach, and bayou, and bay, and barrier island. Extends all the way from Sabine Pass all the way down to Boca Chica. And I'll tell you, within the context of that bay is some of the absolute best of the best. Here's what it's composed of. 7 major bay systems that are literally teeming with redfish and trout and blue crabs, oysters, pelicans, ibis, roseate spoonbills, and waterfowl aplenty. Those 7 bay systems, as Frank said, are supported by 15 major rivers that come cascading through our state and sustain them with life-giving water and nutrients and sediments. We're protected by 6 big barrier islands which help to absorb the blows from storm surges when they come in from the Gulf of Mexico. Within it, you've got 3,300 miles of wandering shoreline of marsh and estuarine habitat and bay and riverine delta. They support 95% of all of the finfish and shellfish that you can find in the Gulf of Mexico. They play a disproportionately large role as wintering habitat and stopover habitat for migratory birds along the most important flyway in all of the United States. But it's not just the natural communities that our coast so proudly supports. It's also all of us. A quarter of us live on the Texas coast. When we look at the Texas coast, 5 of the 10 largest ports in the United States are proudly found within our borders. 50% of all the petroleum chemical production in our state is produced right here on our coast. 25% of all the refining capacity is found along our Gulf Coast. And we're also a place of extraordinary intellectual capital when you look at the amazing universities that are found in Houston, in Galveston, in Corpus, in Brownsville. For all of you, though, who also like to get out and chase the Taylor redfish in the back bays on Galveston Island, those of you who enjoy looking at a raft of ducks come in to a spread of decoys in the bay, those of you who love to see the fallouts of the songbirds when they hit Bolivar during the spring storm, all of you love to watch a sunrise and sunset over Galveston Island. You also know that our coast is a great place of repose, it's a great place of respite, and it's a great place of outdoor recreation. We've got millions of hunters and anglers and outdoor enthusiasts, as Bob said, that descend upon our coast each and every year to enjoy extraordinary nature's bounty that is found there. And it supports an amazing outdoor-oriented economy in our state, $16 billion a year that comes for that. It helps support more jobs than the 3 largest employers in our state and twice as much economic outputs is our state's largest crop, cotton. What is this place? Is Dr. Larry McKinney, who's the CEO of the Hart Institute for Research at the Gulf of Mexico. Here's how he described the Gulf Coast. He said it's our gas station, it's our seafood market, it's our place of commerce and trade, it's our playground, but also, sometimes regrettably, it's also our trash can. At its very foundation, I would argue, however, that it's also our heritage, and it's also our home. And so I stand before you today to tell you that I believe that every single one of us has not only the obligation, but we've got the privilege of helping to leave it in a place better than we found it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the work of the Galveston Bay Foundation. In my darker days with the department, and I will confess there are some every once in a while, I once had to give a speech, and I entitled it "The Call of the Wild." Is anybody listening? And we had just gone through a difficult legislative session, as Bob had alluded to, and it made me wonder if anybody was listening to all this that we feel is so important. And what I'm here to tell you is they are. Every single attitudinal survey that we do around the state to survey Texans about how they care about their lands, their waters, their parks, their outdoor spaces, absolutely is something that they support unequivocally. Last poll we did, a pollster called me to tell me about a finding that he just thought was remarkable. And it was a statement that people were asked to agree with on one of those typical 5-point scales, and whether you strongly disagree or strongly agree, you've answered those. And in that poll, 99% of Texans agreed or strongly agreed that we each have a personal responsibility to help protect our lands, waters, wildlife. 99% agreed on that. I can't get 99% of folks to agree that the sun comes up in the east. It gives me great hope with that foundation. This year, America's Wetlands, an organization which is, just as you might expect, an organization that advocates for our coastal systems, particularly in Louisiana, but now Texas did a poll surveying Texans about their attitudes about the coast. And the results were fascinating. Overall, everybody in our state put a high value on the coast. Interestingly, they did not see energy and environment as being incongruous with one another. Their biggest concerns were fresh water and safety, and they put a huge premium on stewardship. And what they wanted were solutions. Here's some of the things that they said. 86% of Texans agreed or strongly agreed that a strong Texas economy is dependent upon a healthy coastal environment. So it's inextricably linked. Our environmental security is absolutely linked to our economic security. 75% of Texans were concerned with the diminished state of freshwater inflows, loss of coastal habitat. Biggest environmental concern, not surprisingly, given the drought that many reaches of our state are feeling, was the supply of fresh water. 95% said that perceived conflicts between energy production and environmental protection are too politically divisive. They felt that that was a false dichotomy. 95% said that the stewardship of the Texas coast must be a priority for our state. Bottom line is people want solutions and they want stewardship. And as you heard Frank artfully and eloquently say at the start, when we look at the environmental challenges that are facing our coast now and to come, there's a bunch of them. Red tide, brown tide, freshwater inflows, habitat loss, channelization, invasive and exotic species, the occasional spill, the storms that come in. All of those are things that we have to contend with to protect this place that we know and love as our home ground. But it's not just the environment that we have to contend ourselves. There's a whole series of social issues that perhaps arguably give us a bigger challenge. And that gets to the point of relevance of all of this to a state which is, of course, decidedly urban. When our department was merged and established officially 50 years ago, just past the tipping point from a rural to an urban state. Today, as you all know, 9 out of 10 of us live in 9 large cities around our state. Obviously, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I live in one of those places. But what we're reminded is that too often the places in our cities are built in ways that separate us from nature rather than connect us to nature. And that has critically important implications when you think about this. Today, all adults and children in our state spend over 90% of our time indoors. Kids today spend on average 50 hours a week using electronic media. That is not going to change, as we know. But here's an argument from my perspective. Kids today in our state, on average, only spend 1 hour a week outside. So think about that socialization process for kids these days and the challenges we have to connect them to the outdoors and to become the next guardian of the Bay. Those trends speak to why organizations like Galveston Bay Foundation are so critically important, because here's the deal. Bob and Timothy and their colleagues at this organization know that for every dollar you invest back in restoring the marsh, you're going to get $4 of return on investment in terms of improved water quality, flood control, enhanced fisheries, and wildlife habitat. Galveston Bay Foundation knows that for every bit of mulch they're able to put back in the bay, the tracks of juvenile oyster, the spat, to take root on that and grow into a mature oyster, every one of those oysters is going to filter 2 gallons of water an hour every single day to help make our bays more healthy ecologically, but also economically. Here's what Galveston Bay Foundation also knows. Every single kid, if they're able to connect to the outdoors, the marsh mania, or the bike ride around Galveston Bay, is going to make those kids happier. It's going to make those kids healthier, and it's going to make those kids absolutely smarter. I dare say we owe it as a state to Galveston Bay. It's our largest bay system in the entire state. More people fish and boat in Galveston Bay than any other place in our great state. Half of the seafood in our state, oysters and shrimp, come out of Galveston Bay. And here's another thing. Half of our state live within the watershed that impacts Galveston Bay. And so today, as we contemplate the work of the Guardians of the Bay, we can take no small amount of comfort that those 13 million Texans each and every day have an impact on this bay in some form or fashion, and wake up knowing that the Galveston Bay Foundation has left it better than they found it. Thanks for caring about our wild things and wild places. They need you now more than ever. God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carter. Inspiring as always. I just really appreciate you taking the time out of what I know is your busy schedule to join us here today. On that note, I wanted to thank all of you one more time. Frank's going to close really quickly. Just make a quick announcement. We have raised almost $320,000 here today, and it's a record for the Galveston Bay Foundation. This is a record for the foundation. Give yourselves a round of applause. It really is crucial to what we do, and I just want to say thank you, Frank, and then we'll get out of here.
Well, you've answered the call, that's for sure. So here's another one. In your brochure that you have at your table, there's an envelope. We need your donations. If you can make one, that would be wonderful. On behalf of the Galveston Bay Foundation, thank you for being here. Again, the auction checkout is right out there to my right, not in the main dining room. We hope to see you.